Hello and welcome to this Fear-IFTA online panel discussion on the topic of the commercial value of audiovisual archives. This session is brought to you today by Fear-IFTA's Value, Use and Copyright Commission. My name is Dale Grayson, I'm the chair of the commission, and I'm joined today by my commission colleague Gabriele Di Maio from RITEC in Rome. We're also really pleased to be joined by you, our audience from around the globe. Thank you for registering and for tuning in today. I'm delighted that this session will be moderated by Bryd Dooley from RTE in Dublin, and we have a brilliant panel of 8 experts lined up for the discussion, and we will introduce them shortly. So what are we here to discuss? How do audiovisual archives demonstrate that they have a financial value to their parent organisation? Audiovisual archives are a cost to their organisation. They require staffing, resources, technological tools, buildings, infrastructure, and digitisation solutions. But audiovisual archives can also drive financial returns to their organisation, whether through repeats on a company's own channels and platforms, global programme sales, internal reuse of footage by in-house producers, or sales of clips to third-party buyers. It should be possible for an archive to show that it's making a sound contribution to its company's finances. But that said, often it's the case that only a small proportion of an archive's content drives the most value. And so an archive may be challenged to demonstrate that the archive as a whole has a value and that its costs will drive a return on investment. Beyond the commercial value, archives naturally have a heritage, educational or research value, and it can be true that audiences generally are drawn to archive content. But in a harsh reality of commercially challenged environments, which we all face, the spotlight falls on the financial return that an archive can bring. So before I hand over to Bryd to start the discussion, just a couple of points of housekeeping for everyone's awareness. This session is being recorded and a version of it will be made available on Fear-IFTA's YouTube channel at a later date. We are also live posting today during the session on Blue Sky. Do feel free to do the same if you have a Blue Sky account. Our communications coordinator, Nicole, will put some information into the chat for you. Firstly, I'll hand to Gabriele. If you could just say a few words, Gabe, about the chat function and the Q&A, and then if you could hand over to Bryd to begin, please.
Yes, thank you, Dale, and thank you, everyone. I just want to remind our audience that you are very welcome to send your questions to the panelists through the Q&A box in the Zoom interface. I'll be keeping an eye on your questions and will pass them along toward the end of our seminar. If we happen to run out of time, don't worry, we'll make sure to address your questions afterwards in a separate form. Let me also remind you that this seminar is just the first step in a longer exploration of the financial value of archives. So your questions will help inspire further analysis and discussion on the topic. Just a small note for our panelists, please avoid opening the Q&A box during the session so you won't get distracted while we are live. And now it's my pleasure to hand over to Bryd Dooley, our moderator, to start today's discussion.
Thank you very much, Gabriele, and thank you to Nicole in our back office there in the little black box down the corner, who's keeping an eye on us all here, and to Dale, our chair, for helping to set this session up today. And good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to all our panelists, and good afternoon to all our delegates who are joining us online. We've quite a range of people actually joining us in the audience today, which is great. My name is Bryd Dooley. For those of you who don't know me, I'm head of archives and library services at RTE, which is Ireland's public service broadcaster. And it's a real pleasure to moderate this important discussion on the commercial value of audiovisual archives. And it's a topic that really resonates deeply with our sector. As Dale mentioned, archives are often seen as a cost centre. But today we're here to explore how they can and how they do deliver real financial value, whether through licensing, syndication, internal reuse, or on new digital platforms. Archives are increasingly central to content strategies and revenue generation. So we all know the challenges, the rising storage costs, the need for robust metadata, the rights management issues, and the growing importance of AI as well, of course, and the discoverability and exploitation of archives and data as well. But we also know the opportunities, and our panel today brings that wealth of experience and expertise in navigating both these challenges and opportunities. So without much further ado on that, let's dive in. So as Dale mentioned, we've assembled an exceptional international panel of experts from across public service media, commercial entities, and even hybrid models. And each panelist today brings unique insight on how archives are being monetized, their value, and their positioning as well within their organization, which is of interest. So I'm going to firstly just introduce the panel. Now, if you haven't got your gallery view open and you want to see who's here, and you're not only seeing me on the screen, if you go to the top right-hand corner and look at the view, just click on gallery view and you'll see us all. Glorious Technicolor. So I'm going to begin with Sila Berruti. Sila leads the archive commercialization and special projects at RICOM. And has deep expertise in rights licensing and archive research for film and television. And Sila, if you could just do a wave or say hi, so everybody knows where you are on the screen. Next, I'm going to go to Louise Broch. Louise has over 25 years experience at Denmark's radio. Louise is focused on evolving research workflows and curating archive across content platforms, including DR's streaming service. Say hi. Next, I'm going to come out to my colleague with the big RT archive sign behind him, so you can't miss him. So that's Razib Chatterjee. And Razib is manager of our user and client services at the RT archives. He oversees the syndication and licensing of multimedia archives for RTE, and he brings decades of global media experience and a strong focus on digital transformation and rights management. So moving on then to Bobby Dix over here on the right of the screen. Bobby is Vice President of Licensing and Sales at CNN, overseeing their vast archive, and he plays a key role also in the strategy for CNN Originals. He's also active in Focal International and the Digital Media Licensing Association. Bobby, you want to say hi? And now I'm going to go, well, on my screen on the right-hand corner here to Billy Segal Gezelius. So Billy is a long-standing colleague and friend of ours in Fiat IFTA, and she is head of the IPBC-KAN radio TV archives. She leads the digitisation efforts and has a long-standing expertise in copyright and preservation, and she's a founding member of Israel's Audiovisual Preservation Forum. So say hi, Billy. Excellent. And Richard, you are here. Excellent. You got in just in
finally.
Time. That's great. So Richard Mahr, I want to introduce now. Richard's from ORF, the Austrian public service broadcaster, and he's worked across a number of departments in ORF, but he's now focused on expanding accessible services, or accessibility services, I should say, including subtitling and audio description, with a deep understanding of archive integration. So I hope I've done you justice there in your current role, Richard, as well. And last but not least, I am looking for Katrina. She's in the middle of my screen. So Katrina Stokes from the BFI. She leads the archive access at the BFI National Archive. And really is, I suppose, from what I read anyway on your bio, very much balancing those cultural and commercial goals. She has over 25 years experience in museums, archives and cinemas, and has diversified BFI's footage sales strategy. So we're really thrilled to have this wonderful group with us today. And over the next 70 minutes, I suppose, or so, we will explore how these archives are proving their worth financially, strategically, and culturally. So let's begin. So we have a few topics we're going to explore through Q&A, and I'm just going to call on each of you in turn, maybe just by name, and you can speak to the questions I'm going to put to you. So first of all, on framing the value of archives, I might turn to you first, Katrina, at the BFI. Can you tell me, how does your organization currently define the value of its archives? Is it based on your revenue, the sales you make, or cost savings against that, or strategic value, or something else?
Well, thank you, Fred. Thank you firstly for inviting me to join this discussion today. I'm really looking forward to hearing other people's perspectives, particularly the answers to some of the million-dollar questions that we all have around investment and projections. But to answer that fundamental question, if I can, it's a very vital and complex question, which sits at the heart of my day-to-day role, the balancing of our cultural stewardship of a national collection with financial sustainability. But I suppose I can summarise it in that the BFI's approach in defining sort of financial values of its archive really is grounded in its strategic value and the public heritage value, rather than pure commercial returns. I suppose I'm fortunate in that I have that sort of ecosystem around me, even though my core focus at the moment is to try and drive revenue. We're custodians, obviously, of a national collection that's held in trust. So any financial evaluations have to be done with care and responsibility, around our long-term intent. So whilst we do set income targets for specific areas and projections, our overall model is one of stewardship guided by our strategic value around public mission and cultural value. But that said, whilst direct revenue and cost recovery, plays a part, we see it as a living resource that generates all sorts of values and future economic benefits. So we if that answers the question very broadly, we cost and project on certain projects, and we try and recoup our investment on certain projects. But naturally, as part of a national organisation, many of our commercial initiatives are in a way subsidising our overriding cultural mission. So hopefully that's
I think there's probably loads more questions in there, but maybe I might just go across to Sila Berruti from RAI on this as well. Would your value framework be similar, or is it more commercial? You need to unmute, Sila.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me say that I belong to a company that is inside the huge RAI family, which is RAICOM, which is in charge for takers of all RAI commercial properties. It means that archive is finally considered as a property, as a value, of course, as public company, as from Katrina said, is also a piece of our cultural heritage and mostly a part of identity. So what I can say that is more a mix. Because from one side is an important piece of our budget as RAICOM. So finally, we can say that is a property itself. And on the other hand, in the sales process, we have to take care about what archive is in RAI identity. So the most complex point I found in answering this question is that as company, we are divided into two parts. There is a part inside RAI that is RAITeche, and which also Gabriele belong, that is in charge for the custody, the digitalization, and so on. And there is another part that is RAICOM that has the mission to sell the archive. So I can say that it's really about direct revenue, but it's not so easy. It's more complicated like this.
Thank you. I suppose, and just to pick up on that point, because you are dedicated solely to that commercial focus, you have budgets and targets and everything. What would be the main archive revenue streams you're contributing? Is it mainly just clip sales into
footage
production traditionally, or is there a lot of new stuff going on?
Yeah. We are divided also in RAICOM. There is a department who is in charge for licensing. Entire program. And my department is just in charge of footage. So we just sell clip.
And is that similar for you, Katrina? Would you say for the BFI, would you be, are you in charge of monetizing at all across all types of opportunities? You know, would it be
I'm not in
clip sales
charge of,
programs?
I'm not in charge of everything because the BFI is such a large, you know,
Yeah.
complex organisation. But in my particular area, the sort of commercial stream of the archive sales team, which sits within the BFI National Archive, is also footage and clips licensing of, crucially, of collections that the BFI actually owns the rights, which are very few, or manages the rights on behalf of a rights holder. But we have also, this particular team have got some really good results in very recent years on sort of going into publishing partnerships with higher education, notably in the US. So licensing again, but our footage into publishing digital products. That has been a really bit of a lifesaver in recent years in terms of the royalties revenue that we've got from licensing from the same collections. And it's also been a sort of secondary funding support because the partner has the funds to help us unlock and digitize more of our film materials. So those are the main income drivers for my particular area, but sort of BFI wide obviously draws from the archive collections to publish DVD, home video, theatrical and VOD.
Yeah.
But broadly speaking, those drivers are often more cultural as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned partnerships there and the whole area of new platforms and digital products. And with that, I kind of want to ask Zoe from INA. Zoe, you're kind of, as I understand it, more focused on the B2C than the B2B. So you have a different take on all of this again. So can you give us an example of where, you know, archive has generated significant value, financial or strategic return for INA in that respect, what you were doing?
Yes, sure, exactly. As I'm working for the editorial team at the French National Audiovisual Institute, I will give you an example where we generate value and impact with an editorial project, because we recently won a strategic impact award for a major transmedia editorial project. So I can tell you a bit about it. So in France, before 1975, abortion was illegal. And at INA, we decided to tell this story to explain what it meant for women to go through a clandestine abortion before the law changed. And to do that, we created a call for testimonies on Instagram, asking women who had gone through illegal abortions to share their story, but also we asked men as well as doctors who help them. And it was crazy because we received like thousands of testimonies. And in the end, we recorded and filmed more than 100 very powerful testimony. And what is interesting is that based on these testimonies, we created a transmedia project. So it became first a book because at now it became a documentary produced internally and broadcasted on French public television, and it became a podcast. Everything was released at the same time, the same day, and all of this under the same title, Just Listen to Women. So this way of working is very efficient because it brings a strong media coverage and impact. And also we notice that it brings a big satisfaction among the employees of the Institute. So now we are trying to repeat more and more this type of operation.
That's interesting, Zoe. And the project was paid for, or the financial investment came from the French television rather than INA. You were able to fund that and fund the archive work you needed to.
Yes, we split the cost. A part was from us, a part was financed by because the documentary, it was broadcasted on French public television, so it was a co-production. So a part of the money comes from them.
So it's kind of fair to say that you're using your archive to further the development of production in a co-production way between INA as an institution and the broadcast and other platforms, and that's the way you're managing to create that
exactly
financial value at the moment. Okay, so it's very interesting. I just want to talk a little bit about kind of some of the, I suppose, operational and strategic questions then behind archives, and moving across to our colleague Bobby over there at CNN. It's such a huge archive, and you know, and when we think of it, we think of all the big names and that. But you also mentioned in your bio the CNN originals, etc. But I'm just wondering, which parts of your archive is actively monetized, and how do you decide what to prioritize in that, or do you? Is there a sort of a long tail there of material that, you know, is underused, and that you're trying to pull out of the archive or find new markets for?
I would say the entire archive is monetized, and we tend to let the market dictate what's going to be used, overused, or underused. And as far as like prioritization, I would say the things that sadly sell the most are going to be disasters, politics, crime, you know, those sort of things. So, you know, we tend to highlight the anniversaries of, you know, really strong hurricanes and, you know, unfortunately assassinations and things like that. Because that just seems to be, you know, the documentaries that are always being made year over year. And then you get updates and new information about how some of these things could have been prevented. So there's always change and always new ways to report, and you know that reporting has value. So it ultimately will change based on what the market is looking for.
And do you see that market moving a lot at the moment, Bobby, in terms of the kinds of traditional clients that would, you know, the demand-led clients you've had in the past, and what you have now if it's very market-led?
I would say the types of clients are changing. So, you know, there was the time where all of our business was cable. It was all cable driven, right? That's where the bread and butter was. And even more so now, it's leaning towards streaming. That's where everything is. It feels like there's a lot less direct to network licensing and a lot more production company and individual researcher relationships that are happening. And I'm also seeing a ton of projects being developed overseas, and you know, not in the States. You know, I assume some of the incentives are changing. You know, there's probably some political sentiment that adds to that. But yeah, I do see a lot of change. It has slowed. You know, I like everything else, that things have ups and downs, right? So it's cyclical. And there were some years where we've seen a ridiculous amount of demand for content, and then it slowed down quite a bit. The economy began to do what it's doing, and we are starting to see a shift that things are starting to pick up a little bit.
And in that context, in that sort of, you know, the curve going up and down every few years with the different challenges going on, if we think back to COVID and where we are now, and of course in the world, because you're a commercial company in that sense, are there sort of very hard targets there for you to meet on that? And how does that work in terms of the investment you then make in the archive to try and drive that?
Well, luckily for me, the investments that are made into the library really benefit and really geared towards providing for the CNN network as a whole, right? Not necessarily for the benefit of my group. So like Sila and Katrina, I am in charge of a sales team. And the core of what we do is drive revenue. That is the strategic plan to drive revenue. So, you know, there's really no balance as far as the investment that the library makes as it pertains to us. We're lucky to benefit from the digital assets that we keep on the shelf.
Good. Razib, you might pick up on that from RT Archive's perspective as well, in terms of you know, the proportion of the archive that's been actively monetized, and what is prioritized.
Yeah, it's I think we are quite different from Bobby and CNN. So obviously we are a public service media organization, and our multimedia archive is close to 100 years old next year. I think it's very difficult for us to basically, you know, quantify what percentage of our archive is monetized, but we have a fair idea of what our clients look for. I mean, typically we know that about 50% of our licensing, mostly into documentaries, comes from our news output. Also, you know, Ireland is a very important destination for international personalities. And also we produce a lot of international personalities as well. So, you know, content on entertainment shows. We have a long-running Late Late Show, which is the longest-running talk show in the world. That is always in demand. And we kind of know that, you know, those are the kind of content areas or content genres that will always be in demand. Again, for us, it's not always about monetizing. For us, it's also about, you know, adding value to our internal schedules and productions and access to a wide variety of stakeholders, you know, whether it's academic, which is a core, you know, access demand to our services. So we are a bit different in that sense. We try and drive value by adding value to production. We do have commercial targets, which are nowhere near as high as Bobby's, thankfully. But we achieved them, and that's great. And one of the things, and I'm totally in agreement with Bobby on that, is the streaming platforms have changed the way we do business. RT Archives has now the opportunity to be seen worldwide. And I think we all know that the US was largely an exporter of content, but now it imports a lot of content as well. And it gives all of us in Europe and around the world to showcase our content in the US, which is, you know, a massive market. So in that sense, you know, we know that news content is probably the easiest content for us to license. It has less rights restrictions, but we also commission a lot of content to the independent creative sector in Ireland. So one of our challenges now is to make sure that, especially with digitization, and we're digitizing all of our content now, to have them on board, and we're talking to them, and Breed is involved in those discussions to make sure that we can optimally, you know, monetize and reuse that content again. I don't like using the word exploit, but definitely reuse.
Thanks for that, Razib. Billy, I might go over to you and ask you maybe to pick up on some of the points from both Bobby and Razib there in terms of the archive that you are actively monetizing in terms of your collections, but also in terms of that, because I know you've had a huge project to digitize this huge back catalogue as well from the IPBC archive, now KAN. And I'm just wondering, in terms of, you know, metadata, which is always one of the biggest challenges in finding stuff, are you investing in metadata enrichment, and are you doing so with a view to being able to use more, sell more, you know, to get more value from it, or is that something you're not doing yet? You're working with what you have.
We are planning now to bring AI for enriching metadata, but we do have quite good metadata to everything we digitized. Everything was cataloged, so we are lucky in that way. Like, we did get to our hands the educational TV, which we digitized, and some of it, a lot of it wasn't cataloged. So we're doing it the old way now, manually, until we get some other ways of enrich it, and we find like treasures there. But most of it, including the radio we digitize only half of it, and that goes to 36. So a lot of it is cataloged. Of course, you have to enrich it in order to find out the treasures. But we managed to do a lot of sales of clips. But like Sila and Razib, and like we are like a station, okay. So they've canceled the license fee here like 8 years ago. So the government financed the media, TV and radio and digital, and the archive doesn't have a budget of its own. It's part of it. So, but the archive is being held as an asset, and we got quite a big budget to digitize it. So that allowed us to give an access, and soon this budget is off, and then the organization has to invest money in the archive. So nobody wants to invest money. They want the revenues, you know. So we do get from the sales, but it's not a lot. And that is because we finance most of the market of documentaries in Israel. So they don't pay license fee they pay only technical cost. So the idea is really to use it as a service. And because we invest, so once you understand that you don't, our sales revenue really diminished since it started like that. And it's always a lot of complaints from the commercial channels that they have to pay for the archive. And it's ongoing pressure to reduce the
cost. Yeah. I think you're freezing on us a few times there, Billy. But
prices.
I think
So
I
we do
understand.
have,
Yeah.
uh,
No, I was only I was
okay.
just coming
So
in because you were
the big
freezing
money
on us.
now, again, so the big money now is from documentaries that we sell to Netflix and others. But we cannot use a lot of the documentaries. We can use news, like Razib said, because we have the copyrights. But a lot of our entertainment and drama series, we still have to clear the copyrights to monetize that. But the main thing that we do is like to expose our footage and give services to all our, to podcast, to TV broadcast, radio, digital. So the archive really became an asset since we digitized 90%. So it's all accessible and it became an asset and everyone loves it. So we initiate a lot of cooperation with like orchestras that are doing like visual projects and they can't finance it. So we had a few very good trials that we get the broadcast after they monetize their concerts, and we give them for free the footage. They pay only technical cost.
Yeah.
So
So in a way, what you're saying, Billy, is that really the value that is drives what you do is really the public value, the cultural value, the strategic value, and there's a lot of investment going on, but your ability to really commercialize it is really down to a small handful of commercial clients who may pay big money for some things, but it's never going to be the and I think that's probably true without going into every archive here, that it's hard to wash our faces, so to speak. but the contribution.
But once the value of the archive for the public and the decision makers is like very clear now. I think we created a lot in the last 5 years. So they are willing to invest in technology, and so
I think Billy, we'll just stop you for a moment because you're freezing. You're freezing on us. So I'm gonna draw you to a little close for the minute because your line is going in and out, and I might just give you a second for the line to come back again. And I'm going to throw to just going to maybe ask Katrina from the BFI just about rights clearance. Just going to move over to the topic for a minute because we saw a really good presentation, I think it was last year, from the BFI on a whole strategy around rights clearance. So do you have a dedicated team or tool for rights clearance and licensing? And how critical this is to what you do and the success of the BFI in being able to license what it owns and also maybe to do those partnerships and produce productions?
We have a centralised team of rights and contracts officers who support all of the work of the BFI, largely in the sort of contractual business of acquiring rights for the BFI to deliver much of its programme. But those staff are also skilled in rights research and, of course, clearing rights. And when I say we, I mean the archive sales team that sit within the archive directorate. We sort of intersect with them to sort of understand the rights complications in our materials. And in some cases, that might be doing a rights sales agency rep deal with a rights holder, or in other cases, it might be just to support a big feature doc, which, like others that I've spoken, has been our sort of serious income raisers in recent years, the big sort of studio-backed or streamer-backed docs that want to use lots of archive, they want to draw from the BFI's collections, and maybe the parts that we know we own, we can license, but obviously they also want access to the parts that we don't own intellectually. So that's where we work on a case-by-case basis. But I have to say, our staff in the sales and footage and licensing team do a lot of their own rights work, whether that be information provenance and clearance. It's a bit of sort of a cyclic sort of group of work. And to be really clear, we don't have a dedicated full-time resource specifically on clips licensing, which is something I have wondered at some points, is that something that we do need to sort of bolster the existing way we work. But currently it's a lot of people working together.
Is that true for you, Bobby and Razib, as well, where you're seated? Or do you have, Bobby, do you have a special lawyer for the archives who's there full-time for you to help you sort everything out quickly?
You know, we have a standard operating procedure of what we know is licensable and what isn't licensable. So we're very careful about that. We do have some legal help who offer some really great guidance. I would say the majority of the time that legal gets involved is when we're talking about license agreements. And when people want to change the language and they want waivers of injunctive relief, rep and warrant, indemnification, you know, that sort of thing. So outside of that, yeah, I mean, we know exactly what's in the archive from a licensing perspective anyway. And, you know, there's just general rules in place of things you do license and you don't license. So, you know, while I mentioned, you know, we do license footage of disasters and unfortunate things, we're also very careful not to license anything that's going to be gruesome or really harmful to the spirit, so to speak. And we have different types of internal reviews where, you know, when we partner with productions that are creating films and TV shows, where we take a look at the context of the use and, you know, we really make a decision as to whether or not we want that footage to be a part of the piece that's being used. And sometimes it tells a story, and sometimes there's better ways to tell a story without showing some specific content.
Okay, so you have to make and Razib, you could probably echo that as well from the point of view
Yeah,
of context.
my favorite refrain when we license content is know your rights, because unless you know your rights, you can't really do much. I've you know, there are rights management tools, and because our archive is quite complex, I haven't yet seen a tool that does everything that we needed to do. So we rely a lot on our legal guys, and I mean, Breed knows this very well. Every time you go to a good lawyer with a question, they answer it with another question. So, you know, that is just part of our job, and we have to deal with that. But also, we don't clear for our clients, and I think that's critical. We provide clearance information, you know, where GDPR and other restrictions permit. So we never clear for our clients, but we help them find a path to clear, or at least do their due diligence to clear. So that's the way we kind of, we do editorial checks, legal checks, context of use is often very important. So, you know, a rights management system is very welcome, but how much can it actually do to, you know, ensure that the content is used legitimately and without, you know, defamatory context?
Yeah, I suspect that's echoed across the panel here, and I'm going to come to the rest of the panel now as well, in case you're wondering. We're just trying to kind of bring everybody in, and I'm sure there's lots you want to say. So if you have a thought, jot it down, because we can come back to it as well on any of these points, particularly around rights, because I think from the perspective of copyright, often there's a perception that copyright's one thing, but actually it's all the other stuff, isn't it? It's the editorial, it's GDPR these days as well, is where you can go with certain things, where you can't, and your brand, I guess, ultimately as well. But I'm going to turn to maybe another subject, and I said we'll come back. We might sort of, you know, rewind back on these. We pardon the pun again in a little while, but just to talk a little about data gathering and metrics and sort of methodologies, how we actually and how the archives today is actually, you know, what kind of KPIs have we got in place in terms of demonstrating and also gathering the data to actually show that the archives making that financial contribution. So maybe I could ask you, Louise, from DR, again, similar to RT, a long-standing public service broadcaster, and maybe pick up as well on some of the threads that Razib, Bobby or Katrina have talked about, and Sila and Zoe so far as well.
Great. Louise has lost her connection.
Oh, we've lost Louise. Sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
back to you.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, then I shall throw that to maybe Richard. Is that something you can speak to, Richard, do you think, from ORF? I can't hear you, Richard, for some reason.
Sorry,
that's right. We can
switched
hear you now.
off my microphone. So a little bit I can say to this point. Yes, we have two are kind of datas, not KPIs, but datas. One side is we have all digitized material we can track for reuse in the internal production process from our editorial teams. So in the last years, it increased due to tighter budgets. We had to find a way to use and reuse clips and ORF archive more, and so we can track the reuse of ORF archive and clips, which will be or would be used from the teams. And the other side is the sales department. Of course, they have in OF, of course, they have figures they have to reach, but it's not all about commercial success. It's a part of the budget. We will get all the money we will get from content sales department. It goes to the production budget, and it's a lot of it's worth to look in the future to make more money and to finance more products that will go again in content sales.
Okay, so you sort of your returns are being reinvested essentially into creating greater opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's part of the financial budget.
And Sila, is that the same for you and RAI? Do you have sort of KPIs that you're working to, budgets that are set that you have to reach, and are you revising those, and are there new revenue streams you're having to chase? How are you defining, or how are you helping to demonstrate that in terms of, actual data and metrics to RAI and what you're doing? Just your sound again, Sila. It's
Okay.
gotcha.
Okay, thank you. And of course, we have a budget to respect, and basically we consider the contact we close. So finally, it's a matter of direct revenue once again. And in the last years, since we have a public multimedia catalog, we also starting considering the number of access. Is a catalog that we can open just for professionals. So we are aware about the number of people that ask to join the catalog and the number of requests we receive and so on. So we are still very linked to the number of contracts we finally close, which is a high number. But I think that opening to an external public and also having created a platform that can be reached by foreign sales, foreign public, we can also consider that point as a relevant point in our strategy.
So on the B2C there, Sila, then, so are you monetizing? Is that a KPI for you as well, where those podcasts are? Is that money coming back to you in some way financially? Are you getting a return, or is it just the contract once it's done?
Just contract, yes, we sell the footage. We are not asking, or we are less asking for technical cost. Yeah. Because our goal is to let the archive to be joinable by a largest number of people, and also the footage to be seen by a largest number of people. And the company, I mean RAI, is investing lots of money in digitalization. So access is a key word in general. And so we are trying to minimizing the access cost. So you have to access the footage quickly and as faster as possible and in a cheapest way. And then you will pay just what you will use, which is a huge work for the sales department, because it means that we have to allow you to access the footage better and better. But I think that is a growing value for the heritage in general.
Yeah. And the more, I suppose, the access is provided, the more you see the
yeah,
value,
exactly. The more you see, the more you buy.
Yeah,
in a way.
True. Louise, you're back with us. We lost you just as I was bringing you in on the conversation.
I'm sorry. I had
that's
some
all right.
outage. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. We will have these little hitches, but we're getting there. We were just. I know you're sort of deeply involved in AI. Well, I think you're deeply involved in AI projects there at DR. So maybe you could talk a little bit to that in terms of whether or not you're using that in any way around, analytics for what you may, what the for demand, or even for marketing purposes, or also in terms of your KPIs that that you're working to. What are they?
Yeah, actually, we're not so far with AI yet.
Are you not? Okay,
but
I
we
was
have,
wrong.
but we have just got our own bot LLM inside the organization.
Okay.
So we are beginning to work with this in many aspects, but we are a bit. Yeah, it's ahead of us. But we have worked with statistics for about 10 years to try to give, to show the value of the archive inside our broadcaster, which is also a public service broadcaster. And for us, it has been very important to explain to the organization that we have a really, really valuable archive with so much footage which has never been seen or only once before. And our journalists are able to seek for themselves in the archives. But when they search for something, they can't. They are only in the surface of the archives. So for us, was it very important that archive staff could help the journalists finding all the rare footage inside the archive, and that was how we started to strategically to use statistics. So every time we have a task for a production program, we will make a small survey in a form, and then we have a lot of graphics in an Excel sheet, actually, and that's how we can tell our senior management that we have used 20 hours of research for rare archive footage in the archives, and that's one way of showing the importance of having the archive inside the organization. But the other way is also that we have worked a lot to change the workflow. So the archive is not only in the end of the production chain where, it would be nice to illustrate this with some footage here, and then we will say maybe it's not in the archive, you can't use this, and then they just drop the idea. But when we are in the start of the production chain, then we can help telling what is inside the archive, which rights could there be, and if we find some really relevant for the subject in the program, we can help the journalists change their minds for the end goal of the production. So we have worked very strategically with the value of the archive for the past 10 years.
So those metrics really are about driving the value inside the organization, and does that knowledge, that information, that data, do you use that in any other way to try and maybe drive value outside in terms of how you might grow other services, other products from the archives?
Not yet, actually, but we have we have two parts of the archive. We have a clip sales department, and I'm in the internal archive.
Okay.
But right now we don't use the metrics for outside the corporation. But the government decided that the DR should publish a lot of archive programs on our streaming site, and it's put on the new it's all the archive programs are put together with the new programs on the streaming side. So we are pushing the value of the archive to the broader public now also, but we don't use our own metrics for that.
Okay, so but that's kind of a new area of value then, of actually driving the actual archive programming. So long form content is going out as a stream. And is that quite successful, Louise, so far, or is it still early days? What's your experience
it's
of it?
very successful, because I was worried that it would drown into all the new productions in the streaming side, but we have an area of the streaming side with all those productions, and people really find them, because if we have personalized the content for people. So if they see a brand new documentary, they will be advised that there is also an old program here with an archive production. So people can actually go from a brand new production and then see an old production from 75 or something right away. So it's a way of showing that the archive is available.
And in terms then, just to ask others, because you mentioned that you have got your own LLM model now that you're training your data on inside the archive, or inside DR generally, I take it, not just the archive. So is that true for everybody on the panel here? Is everybody moving in that direction, or has anybody else got their own? Are they training? Bobby, would you be doing that yet? Is it something no? Anybody else? So we're still
experimenting with. Our head of sort of digital data and preservation is very close to some of the developments in using AI tools for better collections, information and management, and we're doing a few internal, shall we say, experimental projects using open source and models. We're not developing our own tool, but we're certainly looking at it, how it all works, but we're not licensing out any of our content or data to any of the big tech models, but we're certainly trying to keep abreast with the technology and how it will improve discoverability in our collections. But I know things are happening fast, but it does feel still very early days.
Yeah, it is interesting. I was at a seminar last week in London. I think there's some participants online who were there as well, and there was this whole question about our archives, that there is this demand for data sets for training LLMs, and of course, it's interesting. We're all still at an early stage, even though there's a lot of adoption of AI. That's what I'm seeing and hearing from all of you. Feel free, anybody who wants to jump in there and speak to that.
I was just going to add that, there is obviously the demand there, but there are also ethical and GDPR considerations, before you decide to get into it. And one of the things, and I know, in our organization, we are exploring this, but at the end of the day, and it's one of the terms that I've probably heard the most in this discussion today, is value. So what value does it actually add? And how much does it increase the value we add in turn? So I think those are big questions that need to be answered before, we fully embrace it.
Right. Was there anybody else who wanted to speak to that? If not, I'll move on.
Great. I will just add that the Value Use and Copyright Commission is doing it under a separate work stream, is looking at that very issue, and there'll be some information coming out soon. I think we've got a short presentation on it at the conference as well in Rome coming up. So there is work happening in the Commission to look at that subject.
Great, because I think it's an area that we're all, it's coming at us all the time, and we are. But I think the point that Louise made about, having an LLM to train your own data, because everybody's is so individual as well to itself, that idea of having some sort of means of beginning to mine your own collections using an LLM that's maybe designed around you. I know we're doing a bit of testing here on that very subject at RT as well, very early days, but some of the very straightforward stuff. But it's just interesting, the speech to text and that, where that's at, because we have seen AI adoption across archives. Some are further ahead than others, so it's very interesting. I want to talk a bit about promotion of archives, because we've talked a lot about demand-led. And I know you have Bobby at the start, and Zoe, you're going after the B2C, and we have the public and the whole sort of cultural value, Katrina, where you are, and Richard and Razib and Sila and Louise and Billy from the public service and that value point of view. We kind of know our customers, and we've been working in that area for a long time. And one of the things that's quite hard to do is in some ways, it shouldn't be, because we're so audiovisual, is to promote ourselves. So, I mean, I just wonder, in terms of maybe I could start with you on this, Bobby. What are the biggest barriers to monetizing archive content in your experience, in terms of the promotional opportunities and getting it out there?
I would say location in a sense, because we're a global organization. So for example, I'm sure there's a varied time of day for everyone on this panel, but when it started for me, it was 8 a.m. Right? So
Sorry about that, Bobby.
No, please. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. But just being able to reach everyone all the time is probably going to be the largest barrier, the most significant barrier that my group has. And then, you also want to be careful, because while, we do want to promote ourselves and license content, the CNN is a huge machine. It's a very large brand, and we are a very small part of it. We're a cog in that machine. So you want to just make sure we're being careful with the messaging that we're sharing as a business unit. So, just being cognizant of the things we say and how we position ourselves in the market. I would say those are some really significant barriers.
Okay. And in terms of, where we sit in archives now, Zoe, I might ask you about this, as a strategic asset rather than a cost center. Are there emerging markets or platforms where you see opportunities now for archive monetization?
Yes, because at the French National Audiovisual Institute, we always try to reach as many people as possible by being on the platform where the audience is. So I can give you maybe 2 recent examples of platform where we saw new opportunities. First, 2 years ago, I pointed out that at INA, we were only using video archives from television, but not from radio. So we released a podcast offer from scratch. So today we have more than 20 podcasts with 10 million listenings per year. And in this podcast offer, you can find like old radio dramas like Sherlock Holmes, Arsène Lupin. And these programs, we remastered them by our technical teams, and then we release them on all the main listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. But we also produce original native podcast where we use archive clips from radio, but also from TV, because we dissociate sound and visual to produce new contents and to tell new stories. And maybe a second example, we released 2 years ago 2 digital TV channels that we can call fast channels. And one of them is called INA 70s. It's like a real travel in time in the 70s. So we recreated the programming exactly as it was back then. So for instance, every Wednesday night you have theater night, and on every Saturday night you have variety shows. And those channels are broadcast digitally on Samsung TV, Pluto TV, and so on. So, and in both cases, for podcast and fast channels, the revenues come from digital advertising. But it's not where we make the most money, but it significantly increase the reputation of our content.
That's interesting. I'm going to throw a wild card in here, a little bit of a wild card, because I'm curious as to whether, in terms of the emerging platforms and new opportunities that we are seeing, if any of us here, and maybe Louise, I might throw this at you, and you may or may not be doing it, and your company may, but are you moving towards the big commercial platforms to get content out there and to monetize and promote? So I'm thinking of YouTube, I'm thinking of others. Is that an area that's becoming
you know, that's strategic decisions are not in the archive of with this, but I know that DR as a public service television and radio corporation, we are not, you know, we are trying to publish all our programs on our own platforms because it's important for us to keep the control over it. But of course, programs for the youth and young people, it's important that they are on YouTube and channels where the young people are. So, but actually, I'm not, you know, I'm not in charge of this, so I can't explain it very well. But you know, we have our own. We have our podcast platform, our own podcast platform, and our own streaming platform, and then of course we use social media too.
As a promotional tool, more so than a
Yeah, but also making programs for young people on those channels. But I don't know that much about it. So
yeah, but but and are you able to demonstrate the archive value through that, or does it get lost?
Yeah, we are working with also people who are making programs for social media. So in that case, you know, we will also have archive clips promoted by us for those platforms. Of course, we have for young people, we have something we call explainer videos, where the archive staff is helping with the footage for explaining a case. It could be the situation in Israel, it could be the situation in Ukraine or something internally in Denmark. And for those kind of explainers, we also often use archive footage. But we don't have our own archive channel on social media.
One of the things we do, if you don't mind me jumping in, I'm sorry,
No,
we
please do.
ourselves using YouTube. So, you know, of course, CNN has their own YouTube platform, but our individual group, we have our own YouTube platform. So we definitely use that. And I think what's really important for us as a group is we show up places, right? So, you know, we're in London. You saw me in London this summer. So we go to Focal, we go to Creative Marketplace, we go to Footage Marketplace, Footage Fest, pretty much everywhere that I can get approval to travel to. We do our best to show up and just be in front of people because, again, like I said, we are for as large as the brand is, we are fairly localized. And then, you know, there's always plenty of opportunities to send out newsletters and you know, different kinds of mailers and things like that. We partner with a lot of different organizations to help us with articles. You know, we license articles as well. We're developing a stills archive. So, you know, we partner with third parties to help push that information along.
Yeah, so it's really important to have that network and that community to be able to. So, and I think there's something else I'm hearing there as well, Bobby, and I think probably it's true, is that the B2B business, so the core business for the archives, you know, in terms of the sector, and that also reaching that audience and those archive producers and those new platforms, it's trying to be visible, trying to be seen, and trying to meet, and that's perhaps it's an interesting one for us to hear, I think, as associations, and not just ourselves, but Focal and others as well.
Yeah, there are lists of events that, you know, I review every year so that, you know, we can kind of plan our travel.
Yeah.
And we really just try to prioritize based on whatever our business strategy is. So, for example, you know, over the last few years, we really dived headfirst into the podcast market. So, you know, we do our best to make sure that we're visible in that space. I mean, there's that. And of course, there's, again, the priority. One of the priorities is, you know, places that we aren't, right? So again, that whole global piece. And, you know, we get this detail and we really just develop a strategic position on how we're going to attack it and where we're going to show up at.
Yeah. And Katrina, is that true for you as well in the BFI? Because you mentioned international partnerships increasingly becoming an important part of your value and revenue drive.
Absolutely. And it's interesting what Bobby says about showing up at marketplaces. That's something that we've tried to do in the last couple of years, because I think for a number of years, the BFI was achieved a lot of success relying too much maybe on the UK broadcasting commissioning space, and sold a lot of footage to the BBC, etc., for all their programming. Obviously, that all changed. And so as a consequence, we, are now dealing with indies and streamers. So showing up at, using really quite modest budgets for promotional activity to show up at those events that Bobby mentioned, that's something we've purposely done. And of course, it just takes one conversation with a big, well-established archive producer to generate a really significant sale. And that has happened. So hopefully that will continue. But I think, generally, our marketing, we fed a lot off the BFI's very good marketing and evaluation of the archive as a cultural resource, and we fed off that a little bit. And I think, the modest budgets that I have for marketing, we're kind of continue in the same vein, I think. But I like to think that the best way forward would be to remain as agile as possible, so that we can promote ourselves, but if we can be as responsive as possible in a sort of opportunistic basis, so we have people in place now to try and partner with big productions and collaborate as much as possible. And that's where we can maybe make a business case, a very local one, around the investment, investment being sometimes for us, it's using our resources to digitize or high scan material on the basis that a big production is in development and, long tail of licensing benefits. So that's how we're operating at the moment.
So it's very much all part of a whole kind of, I suppose, a funnel of activities that feed the value and feed and you're seeing the strategic opportunity at the same time. And then you have the investment and the return into the archive again.
Can I just quickly add to Bobby's point?
Yeah,
I don't think anything replaces face-to-face meetings or being at footage markets and meeting the big researchers. But I think another really good way to promote your archive and to be found is SEOs. The more, our content can be found through searches, and Google has taken a, strategic decision with YouTube to have long-form content on it. But I still think if that content is found in whatever way and it's associated to your brand, that business will come back to you once it's found.
And often there for not necessarily the correct reasons, as we often see. And still it somehow that drives somebody to you. So
but our website that we have, the RT Archives website, is just a showcase of what we hold. But a lot of global archive researchers use it to initially find something that might be of interest to them and then come to us to kind of, dig deeper and find more.
Thank you, Razib. I'm going to kind of move on. We're doing okay for time, but I'm aware it can suddenly run away on us. And we've got another 20 minutes or so left. But just looking at the broader value and future outlook, in terms of how we communicate the archive's value, grow the brand, the heritage, or the audience engagement. Billy, I might just talk to you maybe about, your strategy. You were talking about how you don't really get a huge amount of royalty revenues, what we call real revenue. The technical costs are your main kind of returns. But in terms of, where you're seeing that kind of development going, is it in the sort of platform cinematic, the big sort of feature doc side of things? And how are you finding ways of getting that sort of value in terms of the future brand heritage and even audience engagement with your archive? What's driving that for you?
Well, today we use a lot of social, Instagram, Facebook, depends on the age, TikTok, whatever. We invest a lot in it. And I see revenue because we got customers from it, We choose things, if it can relate to what happens now or just something nostalgic. We do it a lot. That brings customers, that I noticed.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm at the head of the archive. I see the cultural importance of the archive. And by exposing it in different ways, to to cultural activities, etc. Less with academy, I have to say, because they're not investing. They want everything to get for free, and we can't have these resources. So, but while exposing ourselves, like we became very important in the organization. So it's important for all the decision makers that the archives has to be supported financially and technology. Of course, they would like and they press that will bring revenue. As per now, it's only from the sales clips, which is like 30% of what we're doing because the rest pay only technical fees. There would be an authenticity fee, I think, in the future when AI comes. So I think it's around the corner. And so there will be new fees that we can take for authentic. So it's important for all archives, I think, to watermark their treasures if it's not watermarked yet. And we're not there in everything, but that's one of the things that we're thinking about now, because that's a revenue. And we'll have to position ourselves like being authentic, being there. And we have a lot of worries in that, in that direction.
Yeah. I think that's a very interesting point, Billy. The idea that there's a whole area of potential value in the archives around that business of authenticating what's real, what isn't. And that's back to the investment. Katrina, I'm sure that's something that the BFI would be very strong on as well, as that authenticity of what you're taking in, because you have such a broad collection from across so many different source materials.
I really do hope so. And I think, the authenticity of archival material should, and I hope, become more increasingly valued and prized. If we're going to have a world sort of saturated with synthetic and AI generated content, audiences, and curators should value what's real and verifiable. And that's where, I think a national institution which opens up its archives, and that is part of a big strategic goal at the BFI over the next few years up to 2033, when we'll reach 100. We're all sort of working in some way to try and create the most open archive in the world. And that really means open information, open access, as well as sort of commercial projects that we're focused on. But I think you're right. We'll use AI tools to help us unlock and make things more discoverable and therefore increase, opportunities. But we already do work with creative individuals who are using AI in some capacity, even if they're just generating their decks there, to get development, or colorization is obviously something that keeps coming around. But going forward, I think the ethical position that organizations can take is going to be valued, and I hope that will do nothing but strengthen our positions, as archival custodians and drive sales from that.
Well, that's does anybody else want to kind of speak to that in terms of that future piece of, if you can project ahead to, I was thinking of a book recently, The Things We Can't Know, by, I think it's by McEwan, that's out at the moment. And it's set in 2091. I'm not sure any of us can really think that far ahead, but just in where archives might be around, because we see AI now as driving such amount of change and authenticity and authentication as a commodity, as a service from the archives. That idea, I mean, if that were to gain a bit of traction, it could become a very important value add, could it not? Does anybody want to speak to that again, as Billy suggested, Louise?
Yeah, I would like to say that we are a bit worried because AI generated content is in our programs now.
Yep.
And we would really love to have it marked as AI in each case, because it can be difficult for us in the future to separate what was the authentic content and what is the AI generated content. And of course we can see it now, but how is AI in 10 years? So that's the worrying thing about it, that we know, all of us, that our archives are authentic, and but can we keep that authenticity?
And at what point will that dial shift, where the volume of what is originated for real and the volume of maybe AI assisted, maybe is a better way of putting it than AI produced, but it may get like that. Katrina, you want to?
Yeah, can I just jump in on a thought I just had? I hope that the value of the sort of seasoned archive researcher / producer, I hope that this will in some ways create more opportunities for those people that are really, really valuable to productions and to archive organizations, you know, and they've had a tough time over the recent few years, but I'm hoping in some paradoxical way you know, their work is valued greater because they can help productions, you know, source authentic archive for you know, better use.
And in a way, if rather than going forwards, we could go backwards, I suppose. If we think about the USP of an archive, it is about validating and authenticating what's in its archive. So even if it is AI driven in some way, or AI created or AI assisted, that we have a means of saying that's what it is, and that should, you know, that becomes part of our role, which is something, of course, the media management seminar or commission of FIAT has done a lot of work on as well, and produced some good information on earlier this year at the seminar in Cardiff. I think we'll see some of that at the conference as well. Just want to kind of go around the table before we might have time for some questions, and I'm not sure if there are any. Gabrielle, you could tell me in a minute. But just from where you all sit around my screen, you know, because I think, as I mentioned at the very start, we're a mix of public, hybrid. Like for us in RTE, it's a public service broadcaster with the remit to generate revenue, because we can't live off the public funds alone. So we're some of us are in that kind of twilight zone where we've public remit, but we've commercial responsibilities, and some of it is CNN's case, journalistic values, etc. They're driving what it does, but it is a commercial station at the end of the day. So the commercial, where does, I suppose the question I want to ask is, because it was one of those questions that was burning me from the start when we talked about this, Dale and myself, is where does the commercialization or the licensing and sales of archives sit within your organization? I think from each of you, it sounded like it was all slightly different. So I'll go to Razib first in my own organization. You can tell everybody where we sit.
Well, as a percentage of the revenue that RT gets every year, or the percentage of the commercial revenue that RT gets every year, it is not huge yet. But with the digitization program that we're currently undergoing, and that's why, you know, at the beginning you mentioned that I'm invested heavily in the digitalization of the business. I think that's only set to grow. And I think our position as archives, I think all of us who are archives in bigger organizations, our role has changed in the last 10 years, and I think it's going to continue to change. And again, you know, when you add value, you definitely end up bringing commercial value as well. So as long as all of us as archives know how to add value, know how to add new products and services that make it easier, that reduce the cost of access, which all of us have mentioned, that revenue will increase to grow, and our impact on the organizations that we sit in will grow as well.
Anybody else want to speak to that? Sila, you mentioned that your responsibility for footage sales only and elsewhere, but do you join the dots ever? You know, do you sit down and collaborate and talk to your colleagues across the
well, we are yeah. No, okay. I mean, basically, our department is in charge for all sales. I mean that there is a specific department for non-commercial project, which allow to access the material for free or just paying an access fee that correspond to technical cost. And my department, the department I work in, is in charge both of national and international sales. And we are not a huge department. I mean that we are few people, but we cover a large amount of national and international production, because I think that in the years we'll build a relation with professional archive producers, and to join me with said some minutes ago, I think that the strategy is to deal one-to-one relation, and at the same time to try to be a part of huge project. I mean that since we joined project like Maradona by Capadia or Ron-Howard documentaries about Pavarotti, I see that he had a domino impact. So they saw our footage on that documentary and they tried to reach us, which is really challenging because at the end I even didn't remember where this piece of footage has been taken and what was the right situation, which is different from one project to another. So but in this moment I think we are a solid strategic department. We can grant a budget each year, which is growing up year by year. And that's really important to be, to establish ourselves are a solid part of our company that can growing in the years with some specific investment, but we can also be always on the same line of budget. So this is our situation, which is very good situation, I think.
Bobby, you want to add anything in terms of that piece around where you're positioned in terms of, you know, growing the archive sales and commercial value and the wider organization and how you all link together?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, we're a small but mighty team, right? We
You would say that.
from a revenue perspective,
Yeah.
from a revenue perspective, you know, we put our little bit in the jar, but because CNN is this huge behemoth, but I think that we have value. You know, the brand is going to always get requests from all over the place for feature films, TV shows, you know, museum installations, etc. And our group fills those requests, you know, and they're not all revenue, you know, some of them are gratis. It's really depending on what the situation is. And they have to go somewhere. You know, our group is 100% B2B.
Yeah.
We dabble in B2C here and there, but for the most part, it's B2B. You know, again, we play a role in the CNN originals. You know, we manage a lot of the third-party licensing, third-party content that CNN represents, to make sure that that is attributed appropriately. So again, you know, I would say we have more value than we contribute revenue. But you know, we hope to even that out at some point.
Great. Listen, I'm gonna call us to a halt there on the panel discussion because we have a few minutes left and we're going to just go back to Dale. But is there any burning question, Gabrielle, you want to throw at anybody on this panel from the?
Okay. Yes, we have a few questions, and there are specific questions for our panelists or more broad questions. There's a question for, I think he's a young one, because he say, good afternoon, I would like to know if any of the panelist participants have any initiatives related to content creators, influencers. Is there a commercial relationship through archives and content creators?
Anybody? No?
No, we've missed in on that one, huh?
No, but it's an interesting, very interesting question.
It is.
Yeah.
So
Big
then we
New
have
revenue stream for all of us. Great. Influencers.
Yeah.
The influencers are all in front of us. Okay, next question, Gabrielle.
We have a question for Zoe. Could you share any audience metrics or viewing behavior data related to INA's 70s themed digital channel, the one you spoke to us, especially in terms of advertising revenue, performance, and content engagement?
Okay. Unfortunately, we have a lack of data because Samsung, Pluto TV, etc., this kind of platform, they don't give you a lot of data. At the end of the month, you only have the number of viewers and your revenue. And as I said, it was important for us to release this fast channels, but it's not where we earn the most of money. It's more a question of like reputation and reach a new audience.
Thank you. Then the audience wants to know something about the KPI, and they ask if anyone used the amount of footage licensed or only the number of contracts to demonstrate how valuable they are.
Anybody want to speak to that?
If you want, I can answer.
Sila.
We use both because our rate card works per minute use or per derav. So, of course, for right purchase in terms of right territories and license period. So we use both contract and minute of footage sets.
Thank you, Sila.
Gabe,
And then,
shall we
yeah,
wrap up?
Is that it?
absolutely.
Great. Okay. I was just going to say one last thing before we've got 1 minute there, but just 10 seconds, just to say that in RTE, and I don't know if this is true of other public service broadcasters, but we legislatively required to license our archives. So we can't not do it. And it's a real challenge because we also have to make some money from what we do. So we would have all of those metrics, plus just to answer the last question, we'd also have, Razib, you can fill me in here fully, as it's your bread and butter, but we have very set budgets and they increase every year that we have to try and meet from royalties.
Yeah, we do. And I think Sila is right. I think the most important thing is to have appropriate licensing for appropriate rights, and just to make sure that, people are not licensing rights they don't need or rights that they haven't licensed for enough, and then they come back to you and suddenly have a bad surprise when you have to charge them more. So yeah, it's being appropriate with rights and with all the other factors that we discussed.
Brilliant, thank you. So I'm going to thank the panelists again for the discussion, and it's clear really that the commercial value of audiovisual archives, it's still, we looked at this 10 years ago or more, and it's not the gaming industry. It's not going to save us, but certainly the value that's added is so broad and so huge, and the new opportunities certainly are pointing us in different directions. It'd be interesting to repeat this panel, see where we might be in a few years' time. So I'll hand back to Dale with that, and thank you again to all of the panelists. You've been wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, Brid. Well, it's been a fascinating discussion. I think everyone's warming up, and we could easily keep going all afternoon, couldn't we? Which I thought would happen, but we do have to bring it to an end. I hope our audience has found this both interesting and useful. I've been keeping an eye on the numbers, and a lot of people have stuck with us throughout the entire discussion. So thank you. Thank you, Brid, for moderating, and thank you to all of our panelists for taking the time to talk on this topic. It's really important for our FIFTA community. So many points have been raised today, so many strands to the topic, whether that's across resourcing, investment, rights, inevitably, new types of market opportunities, AI and YouTube. Maybe we'll do more on that in the future. We haven't got time to summarize everything here, but we will publish a summary of the discussion along with the video recording. So everybody look out for notifications of us making that available soon. Also, if you did raise any points or questions in the chat and we didn't get time to cover them, we will come back to you directly with answers. We'll talk to the panelists and come back with answers on everything. As I think we said at the beginning, this is only the start of a discussion for us in the Value, Use and Copyright Commission. Gabe and I will be following up with a roundtable discussion at the FIFTA conference in Rome at the end of this month. And we'll also be conducting a survey on the topic, and ultimately we hope we'll publish a short paper, see where everyone's at with commercial use of archives. If you at home would like to contribute to this topic as we continue with our work, please feel free to get in touch with me or Gabe. We really value all inputs. There's so many different perspectives on this that we would really like to see. And if you're not a FIFTA member and would like to know more about our work and the work of our commissions, please contact any of us directly. You can also visit the FIFTA website for information about the organisation and our membership options. You can also follow us on the FIFTA accounts at LinkedIn and Blue Sky, where you can pick up the latest news and events and publications that we're releasing. So check those out. We will now bring this session to a close. We're just slightly over time. Once again, thank you, Brid. Thank you to Gabe for co-producing this with me, and thank you to all of our excellent panelists. I'm so thrilled you could join us today, and thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Goodbye and thank you.
Bye.
Bye.